When a new game comes out, the entire community rushes at the opportunity to create new strategies, be the first to pioneer glitches in tech, and put their mark on what could be a long-lasting part of the speedrun for years to come. Sometimes people find amazing techniques that vastly raise the skill ceiling of the game and are fun to perform. And sometimes people find extremely precise glitches or tricks that trivialize the whole game. On release, nobody knows what there is to find, so everyone just tests everything, keeping their eyes peeled for anything that could change the meta. With the launch of Halo Infinite being over a month ago now, there has been plenty of time for multiple different metas for the speedrun to come and go. And today I hope to show you the natural progression of Halo Infinite's any % speedrun and how it has changed since the release day.
Are you not angered? No.
One of the most important things to note about speedruns that occur right after the release of a new game is that almost everyone is going to be running the most pure category, any %. If you don't know, games have multiple different rule sets that can be speedrun under. The most pure and coveted category in most games is any %, or beat the game with no other restrictions. Use of glitches, bugs, and any strategies, down patches, whatever you want. Literally anything that isn't an external cheating program. In most instances, this isn't the only category. An alternative you may have heard of is all bosses, where you must beat the game while also killing all of the game's bosses. Or glitchless, where you beat the game as fast as possible without the use of any glitches. Categories are slowly added in over time by the community, when there's been adequate time to figure out what the rule sets for each one are, and if people would actually like to run them. But on launch, everyone is focused on any % because all of the tricks and techniques figured out while testing this will generally apply to every other category. And having all the collective efforts on the one category we know for a fact will be official will foster lots of growth in a short amount of time. Speaking of growth, my channel's been growing a lot lately. Thank you guys so much. We're getting pretty close to 100,000 subscribers. If you're enjoying it, please consider subscribing. The sad truth, however, about any % speedruns is, especially in today's modern gaming age, it's very, very common for games to be extremely broken. And while that isn't inherently a bad thing, I'm a huge fan of extremely broken games myself, the more broken a game is, the more likely it's going to be broken in a way that's not fun. Some games end up with crazy menu storage and credits warps, where you end up teleporting straight to the end. And others have you be invincible while having unlimited ammo and running at super speeds, while others might end up with only 1 or 2 small out of bounds sequences in an otherwise glitchless run. All of these types of runs are perfectly valid and enjoyable. People have different preferences for what they like to run and watch, and for some, that is exactly what they want, and others would rather have a bit more of a vanilla experience. In my personal opinion, I prefer speedruns that aren't entirely glitchless, but have a nice balance between intended gameplay mechanics and cool tricks and skips. That way, it's a nice balance of both. For some games, that's how any % ends up naturally, and for others, a separate category that removes specific tricks is needed. If you're interested in learning more about how these separate categories are created, check out this video where I explain the creation of any % restricted in Doom Eternal. In Halo Infinite, however, there's been quite a few controversial finds since the game is launched that have led to some people declaring any % to be a dead category. What they mean by this is that the experience that they're looking for in a speedrun for this game is ruined by a particular trick or strategy that changed the way the game is played in such a way that makes the entire run no longer fun. Let's go through the route and take a look at the changes that have supposedly killed any % since launch. Most people played through the campaign in about 10 hours. For me, that's how it was, and I did literally 0 side content. That set the any % speedrun to be roughly around 3 to 4 hours based on pure guessing. Nearly on the first day, a gun was discovered on the top of the 3rd level, Outpost Tremonius. This gun seemed to be an Easter egg. It shot tank bullets and had unlimited ammo, all while not having any sort of model at all. Reminiscent of the Scarab gun from Halo 2, many thought it to be an intentional Easter egg. It turns out, the engine that Halo Infinite is built on requires that for objects or vehicles to shoot any sort of gun, that gun must be first created as a reference, and then the object equips the gun similar to how a player does. This reference is then loaded up somewhere where the player can't see it, and it's marked so the player can't pick it up. making the gun essentially non-existent, except for the use case of the object that is shooting it. In this case, the turrets at the top of Outros Thronius all use the tank gun reference, but the developers simply forgot to make it so the player can't pick them up. And because of this, the run was changed forever. For lots, this simply killed the chance of any percent having any interesting combat at all. Halo speedruns are known for having some really fun combat to optimize, but this gun simply trivialized all of that. Also, in the game files, it's labeled as the Master Dong. In the following days, fusion coil launches and clips were found, giving us the first glimpse of Out of Bounds, and an opening for vastly faster overworld traversal. By using the physics interactions of the fusion coil colliding with Master Chief, you could send yourself flying as the pressure from the coil to go inside Chief would give him a ton of velocity in the opposite direction. This was used to jump up this section in the second level, Foundation. Then we found launches to get to the tower and quickly found what we are calling redirect launches. With these launches, you could launch vertically into a ceiling that redirects the launch into a different direction. These launches were most optimal because they could send you at better angles that wouldn't have you hitting the ceiling. That, combined with the discovery of terminal velocity mechanic, meant that if you were going fast enough, you would never actually slow down, allowing for complete cross-map launches if set up correctly. For many, however, these launches were killing any percent, as they were really precise, but saved enough time that it was hard to justify not doing them if you really wanted a competitive time. For lots, practicing very precise lineups for cross-map launches just didn't really appeal to them, and they preferred the incredible driving mechanics already in the game. If precision is something that people didn't like from coil launches, they were really not going to like coil clips. While launches going well was really hard to do consistently, it was replicatable. Coil clips, on the other hand, were damn near unreplicatable. Tricks like Glass Squatch Clip would be 5 successful attempts in literal hours of trying. And with this being the only known method for going out of bounds at the time, if there wasn't going to be a better method found, it could certainly kill the any percent speedrun. It's not that going out of bounds itself would kill the run, it was the idea of such an inconsistent method of doing so being the only way to do so. That could create a really toxic environment where you would have multiple minute saving strategies being so precise that you can only hit them once in a blue moon. That would make for a really incredibly inconsistent run that not many people would really want to bother to master. Thankfully, shortly after, it was discovered that you can clip through the ground really easily with the use of the ground pound ability. By simply grabbing 6 Spartan cores throughout the run, you can upgrade your grappling hook to not only recover faster, but to eventually unlock a move that yeets Master Chief's fist first right into the ground. If this is done on intersections against walls where multiple colliding angles converge, you can get the game to push you right through the floor. This was way more consistent than using fusion coils to clip out, as you can isolate all the variables involved by standing and looking in specific locations. This means that you can make it 100% consistent to clip out of bounds, and you don't even need a fusion coil to do it. As it turns out, however, this would be even more applicable than originally anticipated. Due to the geometry of both open world and interior levels being very heavily slanted, it's relatively trivial to find a multitude of places where you can get under the map and just skip stuff. For most, this saves the speedrun from its destined fate of a ruin any percent, skyrocketing the consistency of going out of bounds and cutting the game's estimated time nearly in half to around about an hour and a half. For a while, it seemed like it was about as broken as it was gonna get. And I mean, it was pretty broken. Out of bounds were literally in every level, saving tens of minutes overall. But there were no sequence breaks. You couldn't actually skip any of the levels in their entirety. There were a few leads, but everything turned out to be really hard to sequence break, which was odd for an open world game. You couldn't get to any of the other islands early because there were elastic barriers that would stop you from crossing. And when you get to the other side by ground pounding through the barrier or finding a hole in it, you would just get a return to combat timer. This stifled most of the plans to get to the other missions early, at least until Dallin Roach left his famous YouTube comment on Hark the Shark's video. The newest discovery would be called Roach Skip, and for many, it killed any percent. By saving and quitting on the mission excavation site, you could break the laser that's supposed to kill you. Instead of killing you, it would then give you invincibility. This is due to the game marking the player as invincible during the cutscene. When you save and quit, this property just doesn't go away unless you start a new mission or save and quit again. The thing that made this really important though is that the return to combat timers would no longer stop us from exploring the other islands. That is, if we could get past the elastic barriers. One of the islands nearby had an FOB that always had banshee spawns at it. And if we got invincibility and made our way over to that banshee, we could use them to explore the whole map. Getting inside a flying vehicle despawns the elastic barriers. Once we did this, we can go anywhere right from the 5th mission. It was tipped to the speedrunning community to try to fly to the mission The Road, because it would actually trigger the level to transition and load in once there. After a bit of testing, it turned out this was true. This was a huge breakthrough in the 80% speedrun. What was once a run with literally 0 sequence breaks, now skipped 9 of the 15 missions with a single trick. And one that in reality was not that hard to perform. In some people's opinions, this really lowered the amount of skill required for the run to be done well. Simply by cutting it down so short, you lose a lot of the endurance and especially a lot of the out of bounds traversal and tech that had been developed for those 9 levels that were subsequently skipped. Personally, the route was really fun, and bringing the 80% time down to around 40 minutes made it just the right length for many runners. But for some, this was the final nail in the coffin for 80%. While it didn't change the route at all, the next discovery would certainly improve the run in the eyes of a lot of speedrunners that still wanted to pursue 80%. In the second to last level, House of Reckoning, there's 2 big fight sequences that have the player hold out against waves of enemies. And 80%, this was trivially easy with the tank gun, and was basically just 10 minutes of downtime. It was soon discovered that you could hit the triggers that caused the progressions of the area while out of bounds, and without killing any of the enemies. With the right movement, you could trick the game into thinking that you beat both basic and advanced training combat sections, and clip right back in bounds to fight Jega. Once he was dealt with, you could go up the final elevator shaft and take on Escharum to save Brohammer. The fight is essentially an auto-scroller, as you have to wait for the boss to recharge his shields, and then for Cortana to open up 4 reactors and blow them up. The fight was really slow and boring, but it turns out, as many people found on their lasso playthroughs, you can actually blast Escharum into the ceiling so fast that he instantly dies, skipping the long waiting during the fight. In normal circumstances, this would be done with the boom and cowbell skulls on. 80% does not allow for the use of skulls, however, so it had to be done with other means. With some testing, it was confirmed to be possible to do the same by placing fusion coils on the location where Escharum spawns after the cutscene. If done correctly, it would have the same effect, sending him blasting off once again. The problem was it was really slow to set up and incredibly inconsistent. It seemed like this might be another nail in the coffin until someone found a better, faster way to skip this fight. As it turns out, there was one, and all it took was a little fear that the entire category would be ruined by this one trick, to get the fires burning under people and having them look for it. If you clip out of bounds after starting the fight, you can run far enough away that the boss will despawn. This triggers the game into thinking that you defeated him, and it spawns a trigger to start the next level over here. If you save and quit, then load back in, you'll spawn back in here. However, the mission says you're on Silent Auditorium. If you restart a mission here, it'll load you in at the final mission in the game. This alternative version of killing Escharum not only saved multiple minutes over the normal fight, but it also saved the run from potentially category-ending skip that could have killed 80%. While the 80% route at the time was fun for people, it wasn't as fast as it could be. A few days into the runs actually being competitive, it was found out that you could actually drive the Pelican. Yes, you heard me, drive the Pelican. It's super simple to set up. All you have to do is call down Brohammer to give you literally anything. Once he appears, just grapple up near the driver's seat and get in like a normal vehicle. Once inside, you save and quit, and when you load back in, the scripting for the Pelican to fly away breaks. This leaves it just kind of sitting there in the world. Get in and fly around. It controls exactly like a Wasp, but is much bigger and doesn't have any guns. The big thing is, however, it flies faster than Banshee, even when it's boosting. The only downside is it doesn't despawn the elastic barriers between islands. This turns out to actually not be a problem, however, since the vehicle is so big and moves so fast, you can actually brute force your way through the elastic barriers by just flying into them and wiggling around. The new route with the Pelican has you grabbing it when you clear the first FOB and using it to fly to the tower, then to the dig site. From there you get invincibility and fly the Pelican through the elastic barriers and straight to the road. This skips having to backtrack to the Banshee and completely removes all overworld traversal from the any % speedrun. For me, this completely killed any %. Yeah, it was like 4 minutes faster than using the Banshee, but all the cool coil launches, driving, and movement tech in the overworld was completely overshadowed by simply holding the W key. It lowered the skill ceiling of the run a ton and made it much less interesting overall. For me, this glitch killed any %. At this point, the game had kind of slowed down. It's been a few days since really anything has been found, and most had started concentrating on getting a really good time with the current route. But as I said, most people. Some had a hunch, an idea, one that had been known to work since the launch of the game, but not had been proven to be useful anywhere just yet. There were a few people like Dice and Hark, as well as Burnt, working on a new glitch that had been known since Halo 5 and had potential to revolutionize the game one more time. This time it was something even faster than flying the Pelican. What could be faster than teleporting? This tech is what is being used in the current any % route. It's called ghost ghosting, or lunge warping, and it essentially works like this. On every map there is a central location on the coordinate plane noted as 00, or the origin. This is the exact center of the map, and it is used in every instance as a reference point for where objects are in relation to each other and 00. This way the game doesn't have to pull multiple reference points from differing locations because that can get very messy. Often in games, when the game gets very confused, it will default objects and people to 00. This is a simple solution to what could end up being a very game-breaking issue otherwise. When you are mid-melee lunge and enter into a vehicle, the game gets very confused. It takes the pitch, roll, direction, and location of the vehicle and places you the distance, angle, and direction away from the vehicle it would be if you were to park the vehicle at 00 facing north. This means that you could teleport in any direction from anywhere, and depending on where you are in relation to 00, determines how far you can teleport. An active community member, Burnt, made this awesome visualizer tool to calculate possible teleport locations from everywhere on the map. The yellow dots indicate places that you could teleport to if you lunge warp at any given angle from that position on the map. This is super cool, and your hitbox when your teleport is actually active, even though the camera doesn't update and the game still thinks you're in the vehicle. Normally, this would mean you can actually drive the vehicle around, still moving your character on the other side of the map. But since the map in Halo Infinite is so big, most of the time the vehicle is in a despawn area, making it so that you can't control it whatsoever. This is fine though, because if you hit a trigger for a saving progress or to start a new mission, then you can save and quit, and when you load back in, you're teleported to that new location. After many hours of testing and finding setups, we figured out the current any % route, and it now goes like this. Instead of collecting the fob golf, we immediately head towards the opposite direction, grappling around the mountain as we grab this Spartan core and this ghost. With the vehicle, we need to head straight to Ransom Keep and grab one more Spartan core. Then we set up a ghost at a precise angle and in this precise spot, and use a jackal to lunge warp all the way over to Horn of Abolition. Saving and quitting puts us there, and then we can collect one more Spartan core and another ghost. One more lunge warp set up later and we're at the road. Lastly, on the road, about halfway through, there is one last lunge warp spot that saves about 45 seconds if done perfectly. This one teleports you into the trigger that starts House of Reckoning. In Zarian's 2753, he gets the first 2 warps first try and a good early game. But as of now, people aren't going for the 3rd lunge warp on the road just yet. Actually, just kidding, Bareface hit it in this run too. While lunge warping does save a ton of time, another 4+ minutes on top of what the Pelican already saved, in my opinion, it's a lot more interesting and definitely more challenging. But for many, lunge warping could be the last nail in the coffin for any %. Of course, it's entirely subjective what makes for a good speedrun, but but it seems the fate of almost every any percent run, given enough pressure and time, that it'll eventually be ruined by some trick that either trivializes the entire game or makes it so hard that it'll never be consistent. For now, at least it seems that any percent in Halo Infinite has reached a comfortable middle ground, and I hope it stays that way. But let's all remember, if you don't like the current meta of speedrunning, you can always create your own. Speedrunning is arbitrary, and so are the categories. You don't need a leaderboard, or competition, or anything else. As long as you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. You know what isn't arbitrary though? Your guys' support. It's been so amazing lately, I really appreciate it and love you all. Especially these beautiful people that support me on Patreon. If you want to join me on my journey of creating my own meta in Halo Infinite speedrunning, then follow me on Twitch. As always, the links are in the description below.
86 UNSC tags detected.
Status.
Deceased.